The call came on a Tuesday in October, which was not a dramatic time for anything. Beth was at work, a quiet afternoon, the kind where the hours moved slowly, and she'd been reading the same paragraph of a budget report for 20 minutes. And her mother's name appeared on her phone, which was not unusual. Her mother called midday sometimes, just to talk, just to check in. The particular habit of a woman whose love language included regular contact. She answered, expecting nothing in particular. "I wanted to tell you before you heard from someone else," her mother Nancy said. "I'm not doing Thanksgiving this year." Beth stopped reading the budget report. "What do you mean?" "I mean I'm not hosting," Nancy said. "I'm not cooking." "I'm not doing the whole thing." A pause. "I thought about it a lot, and I don't want to this year." "Are you feeling okay? Is something—" "I'm fine. I'm not sick. I just don't want to." Beth sat back in her chair. "Mom, it's Thanksgiving." "I know what it is. The whole family is expecting—" "I know what they're expecting," Nancy said. Her voice was not unkind. It was something Beth hadn't heard from her mother in this context before, which was simply steady. Not apologetic, not offering explanations that were really requests for reassurance. Just steady. "I'll call everyone myself. I just wanted you to know first." "But—" Beth stopped. She was trying to locate the argument and finding it shapeless, more feeling than logic. "Where will everyone go?" "That's something everyone can figure out," Nancy said. "People do it." They talked for a few more minutes, or Beth talked and Nancy responded, calmly and without retreating, and then they hung up, and Beth sat in her office looking at the budget report and feeling something she couldn't quite name. Not worry exactly, not anger, something more like the vertigo of a room rearranging itself. She called her brother Kevin an hour later. Kevin had already heard. Their mother had been efficient. He was at a different stage of the same feeling, past the vertigo, into the frustration. "She can't just cancel Thanksgiving," he said. "She didn't cancel it. She said she's not hosting. For our family, that's the same thing. You know that." Beth did know that. The family, their mother and their aunt and 2 sets of cousins and various spouses and occasional significant others, had gathered at Nancy's house for Thanksgiving for as long as Beth could remember. The house was a 4-bedroom in a suburb of Pittsburgh that Nancy had lived in for 32 years, the same house where Beth and Kevin had grown up. And it was sized exactly right for this purpose. And Nancy was precisely the right person for the task, by virtue of being the person who had always done it. The table seated 14 with the leaf in. Nancy knew everyone's preferences, who was vegetarian now, who was doing gluten-free, who needed to sit away from whom since the thing 3 years ago that had not been fully resolved. She knew where the extra chairs were and how early to start the turkey and which cousin would inevitably arrive an hour late and what to have ready in case. She'd made this dinner 31 times in this house. She had said she didn't want to make it 32. Beth's Aunt Carol called that evening. Carol was Nancy's sister-in-law, her late husband's sister, and their relationship was warm in the way of women who have been connected by family for decades and found, over time, that they actually liked each other. "Did you talk to her?" Carol asked. "This afternoon. Is she all right?" "She said she's fine." "Fine," Carol repeated, in the tone of someone who understood the word's limits. "I called her and she wasn't herself. She seemed herself to me," Beth said. "Just cold. Not cold. More like—" Beth searched for it. "Decided. She sounded decided." Carol was quiet for a moment. "I think someone should go see her." Beth thought about the budget report she still hadn't finished. She thought about the 3 weeks until Thanksgiving and the arrangements that would need to be made if Nancy really meant this, and the calls from the cousins that were already starting to come in, the texts asking what was happening, the family ecosystem registering an unexpected interruption. "I'll go this weekend," she said. She drove to Pittsburgh on a Saturday morning. 4 hours, the Pennsylvania Turnpike, the skyline that always hit differently when you were coming home. She'd called ahead, just to say she was coming, and Nancy had said, "Of course, I'll make lunch," which was so instinctively herself, the hospitality reflex, the offering of food, that Beth had felt a small relief, like maybe things were fine after all. But pulling into the driveway, she noticed the front garden was still planted out for summer. Her mother was meticulous about the garden. The mums went in by the first week of October without fail. The summer annuals pulled, everything prepared for whatever the season brought. It was mid-October, and the impatiens were still there, past their peak, faded and leggy, not yet replaced. She sat in the car for a moment. Then she went inside. The house smelled the same, the specific combination of wood and something her mother cooked with, a particular brand of dish soap, the slight mustiness of a house with old carpets that had absorbed decades of weather and seasons. Beth had grown up inside this smell. She usually didn't notice it. She noticed it today. Nancy was in the kitchen. She looked fine. She looked like herself. Same face, same posture, same hands moving around the kitchen with the efficiency of someone who had made lunch in this room thousands of times. She hugged Beth and asked about the drive and put a plate on the table, and for a few minutes they were just a mother and daughter in a kitchen. Then they sat down, and Beth looked at her mother and said, "Tell me what's going on." Nancy picked up her fork. "I told you on the phone. You told me you weren't hosting. I want to know why." "Because I don't want to," Nancy said. She said it simply, without the edge Beth had been anticipating. Just the fact. "Mom." "What?" Beth looked at her. "You've done this 31 times. I know. You love Thanksgiving." Nancy was quiet for a moment. "I love everyone being together," she said carefully. "That's not the same as loving doing all of it." She paused. "I'm not sure I ever loved doing all of it. I think I loved what it looked like afterward, when everyone was there and things were going well and I could look at the table." She looked at her own hands. "But getting from here to there..." She stopped. "You never said it was hard." "No," Nancy agreed. "I didn't." Beth sat with this. "Why not?" she asked. Her mother looked at her, not accusingly, just directly. "Because it wasn't a conversation anyone was interested in having," she said. "When things were good, everyone was happy and grateful, and it seemed wrong to say, actually, I started this 3 weeks ago, and I've been on my feet since Thursday morning, and I'm exhausted. And when things were hard, when there were the fights, the years when your uncle and Kevin weren't speaking, the year your cousin brought her boyfriend and your aunt spent the whole meal being pointed about it." She paused. "In those years, I was so busy managing everything that I didn't have time to notice how tired I was until everyone went home." She looked at the table. "And then everyone went home, and I stood in the kitchen with all the dishes, and I was by myself." Beth thought about the Thanksgivings she remembered. The table, the food, the specific warmth of that house in November with all the people in it. She'd held those memories the way you hold something precious, which was to say carefully, selectively, focused on what mattered. She had not, she realized, spent much time thinking about what the table had cost. "I always helped clean up," she said. She meant it defensively and heard the defensiveness in it. "I know you did," Nancy said. "Kevin always helped too." "I know." Her mother's voice was patient. "I'm not accusing anyone of anything. I'm not angry." She picked up her coffee cup. "I'm just tired. I've been tired for a while, and I thought..." She stopped. "I thought this year I would just say so." Beth was quiet. She looked at her mother. Really looked, the way you sometimes stop and see someone clearly when something interrupts the ordinary assumption. Her mother was 67. She'd been widowed at 59. She'd managed this house alone since then. the garden and the maintenance and the bills and the 8 Thanksgivings in the years since Beth's father had died, each one assembled and executed and sent home by herself. She'd done it, and it had looked, from where Beth stood, from the table, from the memory of those evenings, it had looked effortless. Like something Nancy did because she wanted to, because it came naturally, because it was simply who she was. Beth had never asked whether that was true. Here's what nobody says enough. When someone makes something look easy for 30 years, the ease starts to seem like evidence that it isn't costing them anything. Stay with this one, and subscribe if this is where you come for these stories. I didn't know you were tired, Beth said. I know, her mother said. I didn't want you to know. That was my choice. She paused. But I've been thinking this year about how many choices I made because I didn't want people to worry, or didn't want to be the difficult one, or wanted things to be nice. And I thought, I'm 67 years old. I can want something for myself. You can, Beth said. You absolutely can. I know I can, Nancy said. She smiled slightly. I didn't need permission. I just wanted you to understand. Beth drove home that afternoon with something in her chest that required time to resolve itself. Not guilt exactly. Guilt implied accusation, and her mother hadn't accused anyone. Something more like the particular discomfort of having been given a clearer picture of something you'd been seeing out of focus for a long time. She thought about every Thanksgiving she could remember. She tried to locate her mother in them, not as the center of warmth, the table, the food, the management of everything, but as a person. Where was her mother's face in her memories? Serving, moving from kitchen to table, refilling, resolving, always in motion, always oriented towards someone else's need. She had one memory of her mother sitting still at Thanksgiving. One. And in that memory, Nancy was sitting for about 15 minutes after the plates had been cleared, while the cousins were arguing about football and someone else was doing dishes, and Beth had been watching her from across the room and thinking, she looks tired. And then Kevin had said something and Beth had turned away. She'd seen it. She'd seen it and moved on. She called her brother that evening. I went to see Mom, she said. And I think we need to actually listen to her. She paused. I think we've been taking her for granted for a really long time, and she's finally said something about it. Kevin was quiet. He was a good person, and he loved their mother, and she could hear him receiving this, which was different from some of the conversation she'd had with him about harder things. What does she want? He asked. I don't know exactly. I didn't ask her specifically. She paused. I think that's where we should start. She called her mother on Sunday morning. I've been thinking about what you said, she told her, and I want to ask you something different than what I asked yesterday. Okay, Nancy said. What do you want? For Thanksgiving, not what you don't want. What do you actually want if you got to decide? A pause. A longer one than Beth expected, which was information. The question was not one her mother had been asked before, or not often enough. I'd like to see people, Nancy said slowly. I miss seeing everyone. I don't want to opt out of the family. Another pause. I just don't want to be the one who makes it happen. She paused. I'd like someone else to do the cooking, or for us to go somewhere. I'd like to sit at the table instead of getting up from it. She stopped. That sounds like such a small thing. It doesn't sound small to me, Beth said. She organized Thanksgiving that year. Not in the way her mother had organized it. She didn't have 30 years of accumulated knowledge about who needed to sit where and whose preferences had changed. She made mistakes. She forgot that one cousin had become lactose intolerant and had to scramble. She ordered pies from a bakery instead of making them from scratch, which her Aunt Carol commented on once and then didn't again. The timing was off. Things were ready in the wrong order, a long wait between one dish and the next, which her mother would never have allowed. But her mother sat at the table. She sat at the table, and someone else refilled her glass, and someone else got up to check the stove, and Nancy just sat. Beth watched her at one point in the middle of the meal, just for a moment, from across the table, and her mother was laughing at something Kevin had said, really laughing, the kind where she closed her eyes briefly, and she looked like a version of herself that Beth hadn't seen in years. Not the version that was managing everything, just her. After dinner, while the dishes were being done by people who were not Nancy, Beth sat next to her mother on the couch and they watched the noise of the family around them, the cousins arguing good-naturedly about something, her aunt telling a story that was getting increasingly embellished with each telling, Kevin helping his daughter with a card game she was teaching him. "Okay?" Beth asked. Nancy looked at the room. She looked at it for a long moment. "Really okay," she said. She reached over and squeezed Beth's hand once. "Thank you. I should have asked sooner." Nancy looked at her. "You asked now," she said. "That counts." The pies from the bakery were fine, as it turned out. Not the same as her mother's. They would never be the same as her mother's. But fine, eaten, appreciated, part of the day. Carol had a second piece of the pecan, which Beth noted. The following year, Beth organized it again. She was better at it. She knew by then some of the things her mother had always known, the chair arrangement, the timing, the fact that the gravy needed to be started earlier than seemed necessary. She learned some of it from doing it wrong, and some of it from asking her mother, who was generous about sharing what she knew now that the knowing wasn't also the doing. Her mother contributed a dish, the sweet potatoes, which were her specific recipe that no one else made right, and she brought them in a dish that went straight to the table, and she sat down. There was a moment, mid-meal, when Beth looked at the table from her new position at the head of it. All the people, the food, the noise of a family being a family. She thought about all the times her mother had sat in this position and seen this and felt whatever she'd felt. Whatever complicated combination of love and depletion and pride and exhaustion had accompanied 31 years of making this table happen. She felt some of it now, a version of it. She looked down the table at her mother, who was talking to Carol about something, animated, gesturing slightly, completely present in a way that was different from the presence of someone who is managing an event. She was just there. Just a person at a table with people she loved, not responsible for any of it except her own enjoyment. The tradition had not ended. It had just changed who paid for it. Beth carried the dishes to the kitchen after dinner and stood at the sink for a moment, looking out the window at the backyard where the mums her mother had planted were past their peak now, the particular rust and gold of November fading toward the end of things. She thought about the impatiens still in the ground the October before, the garden her mother had stopped tending on schedule, the first small sign that something had needed to change. She turned off the water and went back to the table. There were still people there. It was early, no one was ready to leave, which was the thing she'd always loved about these evenings, the way they went long. Kevin was refilling glasses. Her cousin's daughter was asleep on the couch, having lasted until about 9 o'clock and then collapsed with the completeness of the very young. Carol was telling another story. Her mother caught her eye from across the table. Nothing passed between them explicitly, just a look, the particular kind between two people who have had a real conversation and are both still in it. Beth sat back down. She stayed until almost midnight. They all did. If this story made you think of someone, a person who made things look easy for so long that you stopped thinking about what it was costing them, leave a word in the comments. You don't have to explain it. Sometimes, the thought is the thing. Take care of yourselves.